I like me crab and me callaloo. I don't like no mulligan stew. I like to be on the open sea. Believe me, that is the life for me.
As we continue this series of Wires of Rain, Ambush in the Night, we were given the opportunity to journey to Darkview along the Leeward coast right into North Leeward. We're hosted by VINLEC, and we are on our way to go and see the damage that VINLEC sustained on their pipeline, primarily the pipeline that goes from Darkview to the Richmond power plant. We're hoping on this journey as well that we would see some bits of Cumberland, and of course we will chat with the senior engineers to get a bigger picture of the challenges that VINLEC are facing on account of the Christmas floods. We're standing here with members of the VINLEC staff, and I'm going to introduce them to you. This is
Augustus Ambrose, Senior Generation Engineer.
So we have a Senior Generation Engineer in the form of Augustus Ambrose, and we have Dr. Vaughan Lewis, who I know. But Vaughan, what's your official position at VINLEC?
My position is Manager Engineering. I'm in charge of the engineering departments.
So Vaughan is in charge of the engineering department, and we have
Sylvanus Foster, Station Supervisor, Cumberland and Richmond.
So we have Sylvanus Foster, who is the station supervisor. And what we're about to do here, we are at Darkview. And what we're about to do here is to move up to your damaged, to have a look at your damaged pipeline. Is that what we're going to inspect now? So it's an intake facility. And pipeline. So just if you may, let's just move on and get straight to it and see what it is they've actually sustained here. And we'll ask them some questions in terms of what they're doing about repair and the actual costs of the damage and what is affected. So let's move on.
If you came here last week, you would not have been able to drive past this point.
So that landslide that we're seeing at the right of Chester, up above there, is what took out this section of the pipe.
The pipeline was, lots of better words, attacked from both sides.
It was ambushed in the night.
It was the river on one side,
Yes.
landslides on the other side.
So as we can see above here, this is a significant landslide. I don't know in terms of tonnage of dirt and stone that would have come down from almost a 90-degree precipice. And clearly, this worm-like pipe that we're talking about had no chance.
No, it hadn't. It's a wood-stave pipeline, which Mr. Foster can describe it better than me.
So Foster, yes, tell us what we're looking at.
This is the wood pipeline. It's made from wood stave and it's coupled up with bands. So this pipe, yeah. So because of the landslide, it just break it into to channel the water to the plant from the headworks. We channel from the intakes at Richmond, and it channel the water to the plant at So this is what it's for.
So this is complete. Sorry, Chester, but this is really responsible for Richmond not being in the transmission mode at the moment, or generation mode rather.
So this is what we used to just take the water from the river and channel it back to the power plant at Richmond.
So Vaughan, you were saying as we were driving that Richmond was down on the books for being updated in any event.
Yes.
But it wasn't really the pipeline that you had in mind.
Well, there were parts of the pipeline that were supposed to be upgraded during the course of this year, but we didn't intend to completely replace the damage that we have sustained. When we get to the power station, we will show you the equipment that is in the process being upgraded. The equipment has already been manufactured and shipped and should actually be here next week. arrive in St. Vincent next week. So the whole project has received a setback because of this damage, because while we expected to have the plant probably commissioned with new equipment in about 2 months, we would not be able to get water back to the plant in that time.
So this has actually forced you now, I think you're explaining that, because you were going to phase the work at Richmond. Was that so?
We're going to upgrade sections of the pipeline in different phases, but from the damage that we have sustained, we would not only have to upgrade a larger section of the pipeline, but we're looking at redesigning certain areas which we now know are more vulnerable to the flood events than we had realized in the past.
All right, let's go have a closer look, man. So, as we can look ahead, what we're seeing is an excavator of some sort trying to move stuff out of the way. But what's quite noticeable is that what now looks like a riverbed was actually the road.
Yes, it was.
So what we're seeing here is a diversion around where the road
Yes.
was before. And I mean, picture speaks 1,000 words. This must tell you the scale of devastation that the river caused in that flood activity.
In some areas, my estimate is that the river probably excavated about 4 to 5 feet of the road, 3 or 4 feet, and exposed boulders in the riverbed. When you approach it, it looks like part of the Rabakajai River instead of a road.
What is now the original riverbed that this road to Darkview was built on, we can really understand what took place here. I'm seeing a pipeline that obviously carried water, pipe-borne water, clearly. That's no longer functional. This would have been put down when the road was built. And now this line there, totally a victim to the floods. And just, I don't know if you can pick this up, but you can see the evidence of the VINLEC pipeline that carried the water to the turbine. You can see it came through alongside the road, I would imagine, and it's completely annihilated. JCB front-end loader that's helping to clear up the debris that's been caused by the flood. We're in the cab of this massive machine which has plenty lifting power, and we're seeing from the perspective of the driver what actually he does in terms of moving this rubble. And as I sit in the cab, I can actually feel the machine bulldozing its way through. It's not a bulldozer, but you can feel the machine bulldozing its way through with its sheer power. You must have a sense of the driver that is, a sense of power yourself when you're operating a machine like this. Some kind of feeling of invincibility, Chester.
So what are you actually doing right now? What are you trying to achieve?
Just cleaning the debris, making a bypass road for the visitors to go to the fall to get their visit and shower as usual.
So this is part of VINLEC's work as well. Are you facilitating VINLEC as well?
Well, it's a part of Braxton.
Braxton, okay.
So I'm told this machine actually belongs to the IADC, which is the International Development Airport company, and so it will normally be deployed out at Argyle, doing excavation and lifting for the construction of the Argyle International Airport. So, gentlemen, I'm now noticing that your pipeline is damaged in several different parts along the way. So this is completely, I mean, this has to be replaced. Yes. There's no two ways about it. Everything has to be picked up and put back together.
Yes, we have to replace this, but at the moment we're just looking at the assessment and see how best what we can use instead of putting it back at the way it was.
So you want to make sure that when you put it back, you're giving yourself the best chance of something like this reoccurring. Well, you want to mitigate against that, right, I suppose.
Yeah, well, the issue is that we're not looking at just putting back the pipeline in its original state in terms of the material would stay, and in terms of the design itself. We have to learn some lessons from what happened here. So we're in the process of thinking of different alternative ways of putting back the pipeline, whether it's be a steel pipe, and one of the suggestions is that we should have it certainly elevated such that it will allow enough space for the water to flow and save the pipe. So there are different options that we are considering.
Give me an idea of, I want to see the impact of, what has happened in terms of what we've lost. When this Richmond hydro plant is performing at its peak, what is the generation in terms of megawatts or kilowatts?
Richmond produces 1.1 megawatts when it's at its peak. To give the comparison, our national peak in St. Vincent is about 21 megawatts is the highest we ever attained. So 1.1 megawatts of 21 is about 5% when Richmond is producing. And
we're not going to have that 5% for quite a while, it would appear, because apart from the fact that you are going to refurbish what was there, you're now presented with this problem where you have to take the pipe out. What, in terms of time frame, are we looking at to get Richmond back up and running with the replaced pipe and the new equipment that you're going to put in?
Well, the issue with the new equipment, which we already have on stream, that should be in the next 2 to 3 months, the actual equipment itself, because that was a project that was contemplated before. The pipeline in itself, we had contemplated to do sections of the pipeline, but now that it failed, we'll have to look at doing the entire pipeline in itself. So it will take us a good while, maybe up to a year, to get Richmond back.
In terms of fully operational or operational period?
Well, fully operational, because the pipeline is a critical conduit in which the water flows to get to the station. So we'll have new equipment at the station probably by end of March, April. We will do some what you call dry commissioning in terms of testing those new equipment without water. And then whenever the pipeline is back, then we'll actually run the station.
So if I understand you right, you're saying that the station may not be turned back on for generating electricity purposes. Clearly not until the pipeline is fixed, because you can't run the station without the water to turn the turbine. So the time frame we're looking at here is, a year,
It could
Upwards to a year?
Optimistically, it could be September, October, but realistically, it depends on how things work because there are a lot of players in this. It's not only, we can't just re-establish the pipeline without having some of this facility fixed. And if you see there is heavy equipment, not from us, but from other agencies working here. So we would have to work together to get the whole area fixed. And the construction of the pipeline would be partially dependent on that.
To break that down to dollars and cents, because we have this issue with fuel surcharge, obviously, and the fuel surcharge is a relation to the fuel that we consume to generate electricity. This is a hydroelectric power plant which was going to offset the consumption of fuel. Without it being in service for a year, tell me what is the
3 to 4 million
impact? Yes.
That's about 3 to 4 million EC dollars extra in fuel that we have to buy.
So $3 to $4 million extra in fuel that we have to buy. That obviously will be part of the fuel surcharge. So the consumer is going to feel that effect for at least a year.
Yes, and well, we have now been running for about 3.5 weeks without any hydro power stations online. We hope to have some of the others online starting this weekend. But Richmond itself, the impact of Richmond itself, there will be an effect on the fuel surcharge.
Tell me something, January, the first 3 to 4 months of the year anyway, are typically the dry months. And if we didn't have this flood, clearly you may not have been operating at full capacity in any event, because assuming we had a proper dry season, I'm making assumptions here, but I want you to expand on the point I'm trying to make. The dry season affects the output of your hydroelectric generation. So you're going to have to spend part of that 3 or 4 million anyway.
Yes, but the dry season affects the power stations differently. The output from the dry season, for example, affects the Connell system more than it does the Richmond system. So there are times when we have a severe dry season that the output from the station would be significantly diminished. But compared to, for example, the Connell power station, the output is fairly consistent throughout the year.
So this is one of the consistent hydroelectric plants, because
at this plant it will continue at a base load during that period. So we'll continue to have generation at this plant 24 hours a day.
At Cumberland, for example, it reaches to the point where we usually have to shut down for periods, store water, and
because of the dry season.
Because of the dry season.
But you don't have to do that at Richmond.
No.
So we're going to make our way up to. Are we actually going to get to the catchment area, if that's what it's called, where you start harnessing the water?
Yes.
So let's move on then.
The $3 to $4 million I was speaking about includes the dry season. That's the average. You understand?
So we're talking again about this $3 to $4 million that you're going to consume extra in fuel. It's not just as a result of the flood, but it's also you've factored in the dry season as well for that.
The figure I gave you, it's when I say 3 to 4, it depends on the season. How much rain you get annually, but it factors in the fact that it takes into consideration the fact that we don't always have full output throughout the year.
Right. So that $3 to $4 million would be as a direct result of the flood, the damage that you've sustained from the flood.
And some of it, well, this year is unique in that we would have taken the power station out of service for about 3 months anyway. So, but the remaining time, it's due to the flood. The remaining time that we're speaking about, it's due to the flood.
Okay, understood.
As we're going, do you want to make a point here?
Yes. This is one of the areas where it's obvious that the river burst its banks. I am not a river expert, but it is apparent that the riverbed here is very shallow, fairly shallow, and that it just could not contain the water and flowed straight onto the road. you can see the direction of the vegetation and direction of the flow, and that indicates the direction of the water from the river. I don't know if you notice as well, some of our lines are down.
Yeah, we can see that. We can see that some of the lines are down because poles have been taken out. And just as he's pointing out, if you look at the vegetation here, you can see where the river exited the normal course of flow, bursting the bank as it were, and the vegetation tells the story. The river pushing on towards the road, and of course creating the damage on the pipe.
As we learn more about VINLEC, you know, VINLEC seems to be VINLEC seems to have replaced Cable and Wireless as the big bad utility company, because those fuel surcharges continue to rise and rise, and certainly in the eyes of the public, who are not interested in the details, in the very real details that you have to respond to. And we're not trying to do PR per se for VINLEC, but explain, maybe you could give us a general background to what obtains at VINLEC, given where you are, given your power stations, given your capacity. If you can synopsize for us and for the public what it is you're dealing with.
Well, our hydro power stations contribute between 17 and 20% of the energy generated on St. Vincent and the Grenadines. While we have enough diesel capacity to meet the peak demand, so you wouldn't see an outage unless we have problems with our diesel power stations. Since we have restored power to these areas that were affected by the storms, we haven't had any problems meeting the generation capacity. But the fuel component, every month that we are without our hydros, we would spend probably an extra $1.5 million in fuel, and this will go onto the fuel surcharge, and we will see it, because we spend, on average, we're spending up to $70 million on fuel annually. That's nearly $6 million a month. Right. So if you'd appreciate the impact. Just
we're talking 25% more.
25% more in terms of
what you're spending on fuel. If you're going to spend an additional 1.5 million, and you normally spend 6 million.
Those are quick
yeah,
figures.
so you 25% more that we're looking at. That's a significant impact.
It is. It's not 20 to 25% throughout the year, but in times of heavy rainfall like we have right now, it's amongst that. Yeah, because we have had good rainfall in November, December, and we have had reasonable rainfall in January so far. And during those months when we have good rainfall, our hydros usually contribute easily over 20% of the generation for the country.
I want to ask you a question about the fuel surcharge, but if we can just step aside and get the sun behind us, so we make it an easier job for Chester. Right. So let's talk about the concept of fuel surcharge. What and why does a fuel surcharge exist?
Well, the concept of the fuel surcharge is to separate that highly variable company of what our customers pay us, because as a utility, we basically convert one form of energy to another form. We are taking, we use diesel and we use water. So we are taking the potential energy from water and converting it into energy, and we are converting diesel into energy. And the larger part of our generation throughout the country, it's from diesel power. And the price of diesel is variable, and it can be quite volatile based on what is going on in the world. So basically the idea of the fuel surcharge is to decouple that aspect from some of the other standard operating costs of the utility to ensure that what we do is sustainable and viable. When the fuel surcharge, when our base rate was, well, how best do I put this? there is a component of the fuel
That's in your base rate.
that's in the base rate, and that's 1973. And that's when fuel cost was 53 cents a gallon. Now fuel cost is between $10 and $11 per gallon, so the fuel cost has basically gone up 20 times.
So the fluctuations in fuel surcharge is how much it fluctuates around that 53 cents. Because you're saying 53 cents
Per gallon
is built into your base rate.
Yeah.
Okay? So if you're paying $10 per gallon now, for argument's sake, okay?
Cents is very small now.
So you are paying $9.47 more than what was fixed into your base rate per gallon of fuel.
Yeah.
And that's the basis on which you generate your fuel surcharge calculations.
Yes. So that excess cost is what is used, and we recover that, the cost of that, by the amount of units that we sell to our customers. So if you take that cost and you divide it by the number of units that you sell to your customers, you get your fuel surcharge.
So in essence, for me to get an electricity bill that says 0 fuel surcharge, it means that fuel cost to you would have to be 53 cents a gallon.
Yeah, essentially, yes.
Essentially, and that's an impossibility.
Well, I would say that today. Today it is.
Today and tomorrow, and for the foreseeable future, I think it is. So it begs the question as we move on and we continue the discussion.
I would like to add
Yes.
that this highlights the importance of the hydros and renewable energies, because the more hydros that we have available and the more renewable energies we have on our system, you reduce that fuel bill. So if you're selling the same amount of electricity and your fuel bill is less, then your fuel surcharge will go down.
Clearly, we have to start the conversation, and I believe it has already started, of renewable and sustainable energy sources.
Yes, the conversation has already started. It started probably before I got here at VINLEC, and we have worked continuously at investigating cost-effective ways of putting renewable energies in place, because we understand, because we live here, we too are impacted by the cost of fuel, and we all, just like our customers, want to see a lower fuel surcharge and a more sustainable source of energy, more sustainable sources of energy, and more freedom from the variability of external forces. While we don't control the force of oil, we don't want to have to feel the severe impacts every time that there is a significant increase in oil prices. And the more renewable energies you have on your system, the less that impact will be for us.
While we're coming down, I know Chester was questioning you about the use of solar panels, and you're making the point that in Beckway you're saying please no more, because a lot of private individuals have used solar generated electricity and actually putting it back on the grid. Why are you not in a position to just take as much as you get? What is the problem there?
Well, it's a technical problem in that we have to provide our customers with a good quality of electricity, and you must not have too many variations in your frequency and your voltages. And solar and some other forms of renewable energies, they're available when they're available. You can't determine when you need it. So, but your customer knows when he wants electricity. In our language, we call it dispatchable. Solar power is not dispatchable, because we can't say, okay, the customer needs 100 kilowatts now. Solar, you need to produce 100 kilowatts. But when the customer needs 100 kilowatts, the diesels can give you 100 kilowatts. So there is a balance right now that we keep between the dispatchable generation, which is our diesel power plants, and the variable generation, like the solar power. When the variable generation gets too great, it starts to impact the stability of your network, because there isn't enough of the dispatchable generation to meet the requirements of the customer the instant he switches on a switch or starts a large piece of equipment. And there are ways to get around it. Storage technology allows you to do it. It's quite expensive at the moment, but without storage technology, we have to restrict the amount of the variable energy on the network so that the quality of supply to our customers will be maintained at an adequate level.
You were talking about the levelized cost of electricity, not here, but as we were coming down in the vehicle. You were speaking, using that term, and I'm trying to understand it more. Is that a sort of sweet spot where what your source of electricity is compared to what you would spend for diesel generation? In other words, the cost effectiveness of it. If you have to get into storage of solar to make it stable, and storage is expensive, then that stability cost, as it were, drives the cost above what you would term the levelized cost of electricity. Am I understanding that right?
The levelized cost of electricity it's a way of creating a level playing field among the different types of technologies. So you can have electricity generated by wind, solar, diesel, hydro, geothermal, various forms. And one of the tools that is used to help you to choose which is more financially viable is called a levelized. It's not the only tool, but it's one of the tools. And basically it breaks it down into the cost per unit of energy. So when you go into your finance meeting and you want to give a comparison between my diesel power station and my solar panels and my wind, I could say this is the cost per unit. And that cost per unit, you take all the costs that are involved in the construction and operation of a power station, and you break it down into, you compare apples with apples, basically. So that is one of the tools that you could use to monitor the cost of generation from solar power and wind power and your diesels. And our philosophy, we do least cost generation planning at VINLEC. We don't introduce technology to increase the cost to the customer. So we have to monitor those costs carefully. We are getting into solar more and more because we are now at the point where solar is competitive and the levelized cost compared to diesel is lower, while 3-4 years ago it wasn't.
It's just that it's not stable in the way it's being used, because if you were to introduce storage, then it pushes the levelized cost up.
That's exactly correct. So when we introduce storage to solar and other forms of renewable energy, it increases the levelized cost. So we have to study carefully to find out what is the correct balance to make sure that we're not above the cost of diesel, because we are concerned about the environment, but with the high cost of energy right now, the driving factor really and truly is cost of energy. And that's our focus when we do our generation planning, cost of energy.
Okay, well, let's leave it there for now. Let's make our way up to the catchment area and see exactly what's happening up there.
Yeah. We're here at Darkview Falls, one of the main locations for our visitors, and we would like to think that is local visitors, local tourists, as well as tourists from outside. But this is one of the epicenters of destruction of the Christmas Eve tragedy, Christmas Eve system. And we're here with the VINLEC officials, or some of them, in particular led by Dr. Lewis, who's been chatting with us on this edition of Crab and Callaloo. So they're sort of, we've been looking at the folks who have been trying to assess the damage and what it'll take to recover from as a tourism point of view, but you are looking at it from the VINLEC point of view. There's colossal damage here, and at this point, what is your assessment? What is happening here from your point of view?
Well, in this valley, the destruction has led to one of our important hydro stations being taken offline, and while it has not severely affected our ability to deliver electricity to persons, it will definitely affect the cost. So one of the drivers here for us is to restore these hydros as quickly as possible, because we are among the first to admit that cost of energy is high, and we must do everything that we possibly can to address those issues that could severely impact the cost of energy to our customers.
A part of the mission of CRAB and Callaloo is to sort of get beneath the surface and not report as such, but talk to people like yourself who are experts in the field and see if we can take Vincentians below the surface to understand what is happening to us at a social level, at an economic level, at a level that makes a difference instead of just looking at it in a superficial way. So I might repeat some questions, answers to which you've given before, but all that repetition is the mother of education. So forgive me if I ask some of the same questions, but repetition is good. We're in Darkview Falls now, and you were mentioning off camera, and this is what I'm referring to when we seek to go beneath the surface, that we may be our own worst enemy because one department is not talking to another, one ministry of government is not talking to another. We've experienced this with the folks at forestry. They say that, you know, CWSA and VINLEC, and there's no smooth line of communication between all these entities. Do we see evidence of this here, maybe from your point of view? You were just referring off mic to the bridge that came down and the construction of that bridge.
Yeah. Well, that's quite a leading question. But I wouldn't say there is a lack of communication among agencies in relation to this. I would say that there are lessons that we can learn from, because very few of us have ever anticipated that we will see this level of flooding in these valleys. And one of the points that we believe water entered where the river bursts its banks is at the bridge, and it's apparent that the bridge, the construction of the bridge, like many bridges around the world, narrows that section of the river. And now that we have that lesson, it is something that we have to consider and learn from when we look at re-establishing the bridge and other structures that have been damaged. Because even with our pipeline, we did not anticipate some of the damage that we received, and we are now looking at other possible solutions that can be used to limit the sort of destruction that we faced if future events occur.
I want to go back to the line of questioning we had before, vis-a-vis solar power and renewable energy and the increasing surcharge. What sort of thinking should Vincentians have? Because fossil fuel is going to continue to increase as it gets less. The earth is producing less of it, and you know, economics tells us that the price is going to go up, as we've seen. That's one. So the fuel surcharge, in all likelihood, is going to continue to rise. It has nothing to do with VINLEC per se. That's the global issue. We also have challenges in doing the transition from fossil fuel driven energy to solar. You talked about the storage problem, where the costs are extremely high to store. So what sort of thinking should Vincentians adopt instead of being aggressive and anti-VINLEC and complaining? How should they be thinking? What sort of thought processes should they be having in terms of this bigger picture?
Well, the issue of a high cost of living, not only with electricity but fuel, it touches persons personally. And I wouldn't anger anyone by suggesting that they shouldn't be upset by the reality that they face. But from a company point of view, we have been encouraging conservation. If you don't use it, you don't pay for it. Well, you don't pay for what you don't use. So if you can look at ways of conserving energy, just like CWSA encourages persons to conserve water, it will positively impact your bill. We have, within the company, we have had energy saving projects within the company, and we have seen in some cases one building that we managed to save up to 20% on the monthly cost of the energy required by that building. So conservation is what I will say encourage persons to do. Not this Christmas, but the previous Christmas, we had an exhibition in Kingston where we gave customers a demonstration of the energy consumption of different types of appliances. And some persons were shocked to see some small deep freezers using more energy than deep freezers which were larger. And sometimes when you plug in one transformer and you believe it's not using energy, it's using quite a bit over the period of a month. We did that to bring the reality to persons. Of course, you have to make your own decision on how you invest your money. Do I invest in buying new appliances to save more in the long run, or would it be worthwhile for me to do? But when you take conservation seriously, it can really assist you.
What is VINLEC's response to customers who say, in St. Vincent, I want to do my own thing, I want to cover my roof with solar, I want to put up a windmill, and I want to get off the grid? What is the situation there from VINLEC's point of view?
Okay, well, the laws of the country allow you to do that. We are a business. We are not solely there for the purpose of profit, but we have to exist. So we don't want to lose customers. But we know of instances where customers have, at least one instance where they have done that. Another instance where the unavailability of a facility caused them to come off grid. And in both cases, they realized the cost. The actual cost, the real cost of energy the unit cost was higher than what they were paying us. So you can put down solar panels and you could put down batteries, but be very careful with when considering the project, because if you're doing it solely for environmental purposes, it's fine. But if you're doing it to save money, you have to look at it very careful, because it may not actually work out as cheap as you anticipate. In some cases it may, but it is something that you have to look at carefully.
And what is VINLEC's take going forward as we make adjustments, as prices of storage facilities go down? What is VINLEC's long-term vision?
Well, like any company, we have to change with the times, and we have to consider new technologies out there. We have to consider the environment in which we live in, and we do not plan to just construct diesel power stations forever and ever without consideration to any other types of technology. And I think we have put our money where our mouth is. Last year we installed what is the largest single installation of a solar facility in the Eastern Caribbean at our stores building in Cane Hall. And this year we are moving forward to installing an even larger facility at our Lomas Bay Power Station. So, and over the years we have been investing in research into wind energy, additional hydro energy, and sometimes the investigation helps you. Well, the investigation is always to help you to make a decision, and persons would say, well, I don't see any wind, and that's a reality. But it doesn't mean that we haven't studied it carefully and tried to see if we can bring wind to the country in a very cost-effective manner. And there is potential for wind, but there are also challenges and obstacles. And the evidence is not only by the fact that we haven't installed any as yet. There have been projects in other islands that have led to some challenges. Because, diverting a bit, when it comes to wind, a lot of the technology for wind, it's suitable for very large countries. I mean, installing a wind turbine that you may install in the United States would cost significantly more here. And we have seen it in the Caribbean, where the average cost of installation of wind is probably around $3 million per megawatt, while in other countries it's less, the larger countries.
If we say the bottom line is that we have to change to solar, to renewable energy, and all these challenges exist, is geothermal the game changer? And if it is, what challenges lie therein?
Well, geothermal is definitely potentially the game changer. And earlier we were talking about dispatchable generation. That is what makes geothermal different to solar and wind. You can dispatch energy. It doesn't vary as quickly and as frequently as diesel.
Let's explain that some more.
Dispatchable. Dispatchable means that I can get energy, I can dispatch energy, or I can get energy as soon as my customer requires it. So you have your company working and you have your large equipment, or you're at home and you turn on a light switch or you turn on your computer. The instant that you turn on that piece of equipment, you put a demand on the next system because I now need energy. And what happens is that our generators can respond and provide that energy to you the instant that you turn on a light. Now, it's not the same for solar and wind. They give you energy when it is available. If it is windy, you have energy. When the wind drops off, you don't have it. And it doesn't always coincide. In most cases, it doesn't coincide with the practices of the consumer. Now, with geothermal, you can control the output far more than you can with wind and solar. So, while, for example, we gave an idea of the limitations in Beckway, we have over 20% of our daytime peak in installed capacity in solar panels. If it's geothermal, you probably can go 80-90% because you can deliver to the customer when the customer requires it, instead of waiting for the clouds to pass or instead of waiting for the wind to pick back up.
So what are the challenges in geothermal?
The high cost of finding the geothermal energy and constructing the facility for the energy, because the energy it's underground and you're basically trying to find hot locations and wells of hot water to be able to power your geothermal plant, and you can't see it. So you investigate and you do. Part of the last process is to drill to find that source, and the cost of drilling is very high.
For a country of 100,000 people with a given return from taxes, is it viable to have geothermal in such a small island?
It may be. We haven't determined that as yet. I mean, there's a study that is ongoing, and we are hopeful that it will be, because the study will determine or attempt to determine the total cost of providing this energy. And if this energy is cheaper than the fossil fuel, we should go for it. I mean, if it's more expensive, you then ask yourself the question, should I go for it because it would be more stable than the fossil fuel, which can escalate in price within the space of a couple months.
But would it be something more sustainable? Because Chester was making the point that clearly fossil fuels are likely to keep climbing. I mean, there's one thing with the supply, and there's also something to do with the unstable nature of the countries that fossil fuels are largely generated from. I mean, you know, it's Iraq, Iran, and these places in constant turmoil. So it just takes an escalating war or crisis to shoot the cost up. So is geothermal going to be measured against all those factors?
Well, it should be. The only thing with projections is that projections are always wrong. You have no idea where the cost of fuel is going and when it will go in a certain direction. So there's no easy decision here.
So the point is, at this point, we actually do not know the cost of geothermal versus our fossil fuel at this moment. We cannot know.
Well, I would say that there have been some preliminary studies that are being undertaken right now. But if you ask me how much it's going to cost you to put down and run a geothermal facility, I can't give you that right now.
Given the nature and culture and history and geographical reality of our Caribbean islands, Barbados has a huge bill for energy products, 70 million a year or something. More, probably 700 million, I think is the figure I got, can't remember, but it's huge. What's your thinking as an engineer? You're not a politician, you're not an economist, but I'm asking from your point of view.
My thinking as an engineer is to deliver, quite frankly, energy as cheap as possible to the people of St. Vincent. I mean, that picture.
Maybe the Caribbean.
Well, there are various options to the Caribbean. We are not the only country with geothermal potential. And there's been, because when you consider cost, you have to compare everything. And even though fossil fuels will not last forever, you have to also consider the cost of the fossil fuels that are there, like gas from Trinidad. So everything has to be put into the mix, and the decisions are not always right or wrong, and not always straightforward.
So one can fantasize, for instance, that St. Lucians and Vincent may say, listen, let us unite and sell to Barbados. So the three countries come together as one because we have an energy supply.
It's a possibility, but it's a very expensive proposition. But nothing is impossible.
One other question before Chester takes us out. I've heard the criticism leveled at VINLEC that you're using the wrong type of engines, not allowing you to burn a lower cost type of fuel. You want to expand on that a bit?
Well, I wouldn't say that we're using the wrong type of engines, because the types of engines that we select, it comes at the end of a process where we carefully study what the requirements of the country, what are the requirements of the country, and what size engines that we need to put in place, and the cost of fuel.
So what's the thing about bunker fuel?
When we install the Lomans Bay Power Station, the second phase of the Lomans Bay Power Station, we equipped it with the facility to burn a heavier type of fuel. And it is a decision that we took very seriously, and we took with a long-term view of the cost of energy in St. Vincent. In terms of the size of engines, we think the engines are perfectly sized. In an electrical system, you never want, one of the things I hear constantly is that the engines are too small. In an electrical system, especially a small island system, which in the big countries you call it an infinite grid, because you have a lot of generation capacity. And if a generator fails in one area, you barely see the impact in another area. In St. Vincent, if you have a generator that generates 50% of the demand that you require, and it fails, when it fails, the island grid would always fail, unless you have lots of other generators just throttling, waiting to pick up that capacity. The engines at Lomans Bay, they are probably about between 20-25% of our peak demand. Those are the largest in the country, and we do see the impact when we have a glitch on one of those engines. We have a protection system, and some persons may lose electricity, but the network wouldn't fail. And once the network doesn't fail, you can get electricity back more quickly. So there's a balance. You don't make your engine too small, because it is less efficient and your maintenance costs could be higher. And you don't make it too large, because your network, just like we spoke about solar, your network becomes unstable anytime there is a glitch or there's a problem. So we believe that it's our opinion, after careful study with the assistance of reputable consultants, that the engines that we have chosen at Lomans Bay are both the right size, and we have equipped them to take future possibilities into consideration in terms of the type of fuel.
We've come to the Darkview Falls itself, where we should normally find a path to the falls, but there's no path to the falls because of the ambush in the night. This is no longer. And as we train our camera on where the bridge would have been, bamboo bridge, a bridge that we would have crossed, we can see that it is no longer there, removed by the rushing waters of the deluge.
One of the areas where the river obviously bursts its bank, and you can show your viewers the erosion, is where the bridge leads over to the fall. And if you notice, it narrows the river fairly significantly. So this is one of the issues that we think should be taken into consideration when we look at the future of the river, and preventing issues like this of occurring in the future. Because
clearly we can see here where this is carried right into the river on both sides, yes, creating a narrow juncture.
Yes. Yeah.
And that of course would have resulted in the river having to find a way out.
Yes, and the river found its way out over the bridge.
As it
through the bridge.
over the bridge, through the bridge, onto the road, destroying it. You similar?
Yeah, actually, when we look at the analysis of the flood damage, we can see that this river basically overflowed in two areas. And one, of course, is upstream of just this structure here. So one will naturally have to assume that by the narrowing of the river, it causes the water level to rise and it overflow the banks. That's what washed away the road downstream. Mm-hmm. So this is the stuff that we have to take into consideration in the future, these engineering realities.
And I assume that other departments are coming up here and observing and assessing as VINLEC is?
Yeah, I'm sure they will. Because just like persons would need to consider what we do here, we are considering alternatives of how we treat our pipeline.
Indeed.
It's a severe event, and we have learned from it, and we must learn from it.
And there are lessons going on at all levels, where persons live, persons living in riverbanks. We'd have to change that, and a host of other issues.
Yeah, it's one of the significant things when you look at this particular flood. If person see it as a 50-year flood or 100-year flood, see some of the things that a flood can do. So we have to take all of these factors into our urban planning considerations, because when you look at it in Spring Village, for example, you see where persons are actually living in the riverbank, and where the river was probably 50 feet, the flood damage expanded that to 200 feet. So these are things that we have to take into consideration when we are doing our future urban planning.
Indeed, a whole paradigm shift from a socio-economic point of view, from a planning point of view, as we evolve. The measure of destruction that we're witnessing is really beyond words, and the camera will have to do the job. But just even as I see the destruction, my mind grapples with the reality of it and what must have happened, what it must have looked like, and just the sheer power of the water makes one think of the Genesis story of the flooding and how that destroyed everything. And one can see that may have been a true story if it indeed wiped out all the animals and all living people. One can see evidence of this here. Entire road, concrete road, washed away down to the foundation. Trees ripped apart like matchsticks, boulders, heavy boulders, rolled away like marbles, trees debarked, denuded, stripped bare. Water that was absolutely life-taking, destructive here at Darkview Falls. Sylvanus Foster of VINLEC is one of the team members with us, and he's explaining what it is we're looking at here.
This is the sediment tank. We channel the water from the river, then it goes into this tank, and then it's the sediment that comes in, it's settling there, and it goes into the pipe and down to the power plant.
And you want the sediment out because?
It will affect the turbine.
Okay, so that withstood the forces of the river, but everything else around it seems to have been, almost everything, destroyed.
Yes, because when you go up into the intake, you'll see the build-up of boulders, tree trunks and sand that affect the whole area. So we'll have a look at it, and then we understand what is being done there.
Excellent. And where we're standing here was a road. We could have driven up, but as you can see, this road taken out and right down to below the foundation, and we see some remnants of the masons or the persons who put it together. Their names. It looks like a cemetery. What was is no longer.
We spoke about the water, the impact of the bridge on the water flowing over into the road. As you can see, there's evidence here as well that our facility that captures water flowed over on that onto the road as well. So, you know, sometimes when you put in your structures for a productive purpose, it affects the natural course of everything.
Indeed. And what happens upstream affects what happens downstream.